Good morning. It's a pleasure and an honor to see you again in this second day of Textile Talks from Contextile 2020. Today, we will have in the first presentation a project by the city of Guimarães, the Creativity Quarter. In Portuguese, we say o projeto byrussia, bairro da criação. With us, we have Paulo Lopes Silva from the municipality, who is going to tell us everything about this project.
Hello, good morning to all. First of all, let me thank for the opportunity of sharing this project with all of you in this context of the Contextile Talks. So let me talk to you a little bit about byrussia, our project that we launched this year, starting to make a small introduction about the steps that Guimarães made through the last years. Guimarães has always played a central role in the history of Portugal, as you might know. And at the end of the 19th century, as you see on the image on the left side, we used this industrial exhibition of 1884 as a central point, as a reference point of this evolution, and was the year or the years that Guimarães established itself as an industrial pole, strongly accelerating its development process as a city, as a county. Industries then have been transformed, and same as the other places in the world. Some of them disappearing and the others modernizing, but all of them migrating from the center of the cities to the peripheries. And at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of 21st century, Guimarães repositioned on the national and international scene. The historic center was awarded as the World Heritage of UNESCO in 2001, and Guimarães bet on arts and culture as an engine of the population and territory development, were crowned as a European Capital of Culture in 2012. Through this process, the center's deindustrialization and commitment with new cultural, creative, scientific, and knowledge functions of the buildings that therefore were the industrial ones. Guimarães repositioned itself as at these years. So in this context, we started to think about this project byrussia. The byrussia emerged from this context. A project of reinterpretation of this part of the territory, located between Instituto de Design, where is the exposition of the emergências, and the future Escola Hotel on the west of the city, and International Center José de Guimarães on the top, a building of the 2012 European Capture of Culture. It uses public art as an activation tool, but is essentially based on the construction of thought and associated the immaterial component of space and the reinforcement of its use through the recovery of paths and some forgotten areas of the city on the daily use of the people from Guimarães. And he does not want to do it by force, to impose himself, but building collectively with the community present on this territory. This is the area of byrussia. Also, the image is a sea. And we have 6 primary objectives on these projects. The first one is to consubstantiate discursively the previous implementation of creative, cultural, and scientific equipment, to facilitate the integration in the daily life of alternative walking paths, stimulate the appearance of service directed to these areas, and also assume public art as a programming area, a strong one, creating opportunities for artists from different areas, and also highlight the historical importance of built heritage, industrial, and also the river of Couros, and to alert for the city gabbles. Our project team consists on Municipality of Guimarães in two major dimensions, the cultural dimension and the urbanism dimension. Also Lab 2PT from University of Minho, Visual Arts degree, Contextile, as you might know, and the other biennial of Guimarães, the Guimarães Biennial of Illustration, BIG. And last one, the Landscape Laboratory of Guimarães, mainly on the river. But this team knows new dynamics through a much wider set of partners that inhabit this space of byrussia. Partners with whom we met, and they are presenting proposals and for complementary programming of this project. And why we call it byrussia? This makes a lot more sense in Portuguese, because some of these words in Portuguese are written with a C, and in English, no. But thematically, we talk about cultural, creative, knowledge, that in Portuguese is conhecimento, and science, that in Portuguese is almost the same as it sounds, ciência, but with a C. And also geographically, for the main streets and areas of Byrussia, there are Couros, Calderoa, Custeado, and Conde de Margaride. And also in Portuguese, phonetically, because of the duplicity of reading of ser Guimarães, because ser is the verb be in Portuguese. So ser Guimarães is be Guimarães, is mainly the identity that we want to affirm from the territory. This project will happen in 3 phases of 3 years. The first one, 2020, the seed, the exploration, the year in which we intend to launch the discussion and the objectives and the concept of the project, which we are doing these years, and to broaden the horizons and extend the partnerships, as well as this partnership with Contextile, and to mark the path that we want to step up. The year 2 is the deepening of the relation with the space and the community, mainly of this area of Couros, and the community that inhabit the space. A landmark very important for us, that of 20 years of UNESCO cultural heritage, and we want to mark it in the place. We intend to extend the classification for the Couros area of Guimarães. In the year 3, 2022, 10 years of European Capital of Culture, and we want to make that discussion happen. The objectives we defined in 2009, the project we put up in 2012, and the capital's legacy and the county's development model advocated for a new cycle of public politics. So the first year that we are in, it happened in four times and in 4 areas. The 4 times were the 10 of July with the start of the project, the 22 of July with Drifting Bodies, Fluent Spaces, September 5 to October 25, Contextile 2020, and in the early of 2021, publication of the results of the first year. And this will all happen in these 4 areas of the 4 C's. C, creativity, the area of the public art. C, knowledge, the area of the conferences. C, community, our area of community of the project. And C, cultural, parallel programming. The double phonetic is present to here, but in English we might say it as a B. B, creative, B, knowledge, B, community, B, culture. The first weekends, on the 10th of July, we had the 2 conferences for the opening, See Guimarães, A Vision of Future, and the second conference, Healing the City, Risk and Opportunities for Stages and Galleries. Also on that day, we had the 3 first intervention of public art, 2 of them on the Couros area, and 1 of them near the municipality market that was painted during a graffiti workshop that took place there. The second moment was July 21st to 24, Drifting Bodies, Fluent Spaces, and this was organized for the Lab 2 PT Research Center of University of Minho. Drifting Bodies, Fluent Spaces was an international meeting on walks in relation to the liquid bodies that cross the landscape. The project provided a laboratory for the creation and research on the relationship between walks and drifts, sound and silence, empty and occupied places, digital and body spaces, and stories of the floor. There were workshops on walking in a public space in Guimarães, conferences with Italian architect Francesco Careri, with American artist Professor Karen O'Rourke, and with Portuguese photographer Duarte Belo. It counted with 125 submissions from 25 different countries. The third moment, you know the better, Contextile 2020, underlying the theme Places of Memory. I will not talk about the program of Contextile 2020, but let me underline the three satellite projects that are included also in the byrussia project. The Rewind and Play outdoor cinema exhibition, that the first one took place yesterday. The expansion meeting multimedia installation in the tanks of Corus, that's also opened yesterday, and the Textile Talks that we are here and now presenting the byrussia project. Also on the next Saturday, Descoruçar is our community process of byrussia, and we will have the end of the first phase of the project, named Descoruçar, a community assembly where the people that inhabit Corus place and Corus area will talk about their problems, their view of the spaces, their idea of the future of Corus, confronting with the idea that we have for the same places. This is done by Onda Amarela, and this is a fundamental project for ourselves and for this project, because the connection with the community that inhabits the space, their intentions to the projects, and their view to make better our idea for this area too. And at last, the fourth phase of this first year will be on the beginning of 2021, with the publication named Guimarães Ser Visível, or Guimarães Be Visible, a publication of the process, the scientific the articles that applied for them, and the essays on thought of the city. So in conclusion, byrussia is not an event, as you see, not even a set of events, is not a poster or not a closed program. It's a laboratory. It's a creative and innovative space. It's a constantly changing process. And over these 3 years, it's hoped that complementary initiatives, differentiating projects and new visions of the future might emerge from it. Always based on the culture, the creativity, the science, and the knowledge, as engines for the development of the individual, society, and the better quality of life. Basically, these 4 C's, or at least in Portuguese, 4 C's, will be at the service at Guimarães and the happiness of people from Guimarães. For ending this presentation, I will share the video of the project with you. let me only apologize for the video not being in English. Thank you for your patience and hope you have a nice stay in Guimarães. Thank you all.
Thank you, Paulo Lopes Silva, for your excellent presentation. We know all are aware of the importance of byrussia project. Now we will have the pleasure to have again with us Janice Jeffries, who is going to present the talk from Asadur Angzu, and he will tell us about place identity, textiles, and fiber art. You have to change. Thank you.
Good morning again. The reason I'm doing this is because Asadur is in quarantine in China on the return from Bulgaria, and because I've been involved in the first 3 triennales in Hangzhou, he asked whether I would do this, and that was accepted. But I do want to apologize to those of you who were here yesterday when I kicked off, partly because I said I didn't speak one paragraph because it was in the catalogue. And of course, I'm reminded that nobody has the catalogue unless they're physically present. So for those who were on the platform, I'm just going to make a comment on that paragraph because otherwise it's misrepresenting those who were physically present from those that are technologically connected. So, and it does connect to what Asadur wanted to say about Hangzhou. Now, he does have 150 images, and with great respect, I'm not going to show those in 20 minutes. So I'm just going to show perhaps the first few because it will give you an idea of context and location, or what is rightly called in architectural terms these days, placemaking. So I was trying to make the point about textiles and material being able to retain and communicate memory, both privately and publicly, stimulate remembering, whether from someone who once worked in the textile industries, and for those of you who saw the film in the open-air cinema, which was glorious last night, that was very much a strong feature. And of course, to those very personal accounts where cloth's capacity is to receive the human imprint, marked by its everyday use, impregnated with the sweat and stains of everyday life. And of course, textiles can map through traditional methods of making, but also through experimentations with film, photography, performance, sound, site-specific and community-based practices, all of which will be indicated in the material that Asadur has sent us. Whether by cloth, fabric, or textile stuff, stories of trade, transmission, of different kinds of histories, crossing of boundaries and borders, which is now very difficult in these present COVID times, are carried across land and sea. And my argument is always that textiles can fix but also unfix us to a place and be part of a process of making change. It's a question of agency. Just as water is both a surface for movement and an evocation of journeys that can be rough or smooth, but also in commercial terms, a physical route for treacherous trade, diaspora, or indeed conspicuous consumption. And that was the point of that first paragraph. And what now I'm going to speak to with Asadur is he opens the text with a quote from Mary Jane Jacob, who in fact is a curator in Chicago in the USA, who's written a lot about public spaces on practicing in public. So this is a quote from 2010. it is not just about art in place, but of place, so that it might be part of the people in that place. So there again is this other connection to people making places. It's not one or the other. Okay, so again, a bit like Guimarães, where we are here now, Hangzhou is a city, a place, and Azador Marakov says, a cultural hub for the development of fiber art. And his question is, how can textiles and fiber art practices change the site? Now, I'm sure you'll appreciate people use different terms in different places, textile art. Fiber art is more the American term. But this particular area is indeed on the United Nations World Heritage list. So there is a connection between City of Culture, UNESCO, and the World Heritage. So these are often situations in the world where cities, not necessarily the capital cities, but other cities who once had very strong industries, in this case also textiles, silk, for example, begin to rethink and regenerate through these different projects we heard about earlier this morning, to rethink and regenerate parts of the city. So the point that Azador is making is that the value of these practices, these ideas, really sort of begin to rethink the idea of public in China, which is huge, and specifically in Hangzhou, a city and a place with a long history, as I said, of textile, specifically silk production with a rich cultural heritage. Until today, I'm just going to whiz through the slides now. The use of textiles and fibers in art practice was synonymous to positioning oneself firmly outside of the contemporary mainstream art world and at the bottom of a gendered art and craft hierarchy. And here, when I say I mean Azador, because this is his paper. Would like to position some questions also related to the place where we live and work, related to the public specifically. I would say publics because there's no one single definition of public. How the projects and artworks are linked with the site to create visual impact of that space, but also to reveal the cultural or social identity of the place, as well as make relations with people. How do we do this? What are the cultural encounters in Hangzhou, respectively, and specifically in China? What are the possibilities when we think of new social spaces and centers of production? How did Hangzhou, for example, become as it was? Sorry, it's missed out a sentence. And is it possible to become a world center of textiles or fiber art? Why, indeed, are we making projects and exhibitions related to textiles and fiber art? Hangzhou as a place, site related to tourism, to textiles as production, and to art. These are three important things which make Hangzhou a prosperous place for the development of art, craft, and culture, and especially textiles, fiber art. At first, it is tourism and sightseeing, one of the most visited places in China, which I can testify to in the sense that when it's the Moon Festival, you cannot move around the historic site. And many people from inside China go to Hangzhou for their vacations. Secondly, it is the production of textiles as threads and fabrics. The whole of Jiang province, in fact, is a place thriving for production of textiles from many kinds, from fine silks to clothing and fashion and heavy home textile fabrics, which we might call interiors. And thirdly, it is the art and art education and the long history and practices of the traditional Chinese art from ancient times to today. So Hangzhou is a way forward, an opportunity to be successful. And what is it that makes Hangzhou a textile and fiber art center. Firstly, Hangzhou is in the right region, Xi'an province, a place recognized as the biggest production on textiles in China. It is in the right area and in the right place. It was raining then, you see. Whew. Secondly, it's an archive and a cultural hub, a way of explaining and celebrating the heritage of textile art, design, and textiles as production. Thirdly, it's a visitors and tourism attraction place with the prospect for retail, shopping is big of course, and sale of crafts and arts and the opportunity to raise money. It is also linked to a lot of cultural activities, art fairs, festivals, exhibitions, and annual biennales, and of course the Hangzhou Triennale, which in fact started in 2013. This is the China Academy of Art. It's the first of the two sites they have. This is in the center of town opposite the West Lake. There's another one which is about 40 minutes outside, which has the fiber art studios, public art architecture, and design. Fifthly, the city of Hangzhou, including China Academy of Art and the Hangzhou Triennale, try and keep to be innovative, driven, and with quality management, with good governance, board, and contacts. Sixth, the Hangzhou Triennale project tries to work with others and in partnership internationally as well, also to have good connection with Hangzhou's Cultural Bureau and municipality. And this is the main sponsor, in fact, of the Triennale. Point 7. In the end, in Hangzhou, many institutions related to culture, such as museums and educational institutions, working with enthusiasts, like those from local societies, and using many young people as volunteers, they help in the process of developing different activities, projects, and exhibitions. Now, he hasn't explained this. This is Marian Varabov, who in fact went from Bulgaria to China in the 50s, married a Chinese student, and got special permission to stay, and therefore set up the Tapestry Institute in Hangzhou. So there's been a long connection between China and Bulgaria. Of course, I put that down partly to Cold War politics, when you could, as a person in various parts of the former Eastern Europe, have permission to go and study Cuba or China, Russia, whatever. And this is the context here. So what Hazador wanted to show was how textile and fiber art practices, through the project of one exhibition, such as the Hangzhou Triennale, is an artistic method to connect with people, establish social relations, and educate children, young and mature people, to build new forms of community and even address social issues. How fiber art practices that go beyond the boundaries of institutional frameworks as art academies, museums and galleries, establish a new interconnection between place of production, material, and the public. I, meaning Azador, also want to point and try and define what fiber art and textile can contribute to a different idea to the public in China. The site and the art focus on the study is one ongoing project to emphasize the idea of site, people participation, social intervention, and local collective makings. He then quotes me at the end, which I'm not going to read out, it's too embarrassing. Anyway, I think the point is, in the practices of the academy and the way they now link to architecture in the academy, there are a lot more site-specific projects which use the students to try and understand where they are, what they could do, what they can make, and from that take some of those public art projects into different areas of the curriculum, meaning how they construct their courses. Lots of speeches. I think we move on quickly from there. lots of educational talks. And you can see, I think I'll finish here actually, because it's quite good. It ends on this idea of social fabric, which is what I think we might be thinking about in relation to links with architecture and creating different kinds of social spaces and social publics. Okay? Otherwise, you've got another 100 images. Yes.
So much, Janice. Now we are going to connect to Japan, having the presentation of Mizuki Takahashi. Good morning, Mizuki.
Hello.
Can you hear
Good
us?
morning. Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I can see my big face behind you.
Welcome to Guimarães, to Contextile 2020 Textile Talks. We will have your presentation that will talk about looking at contemporary art through textile lenses.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mizuki Takahashi. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Curator of Center for Heritage Arts and Textile in Hong Kong. I'm Japanese, but I'm based in Hong Kong. And firstly, I want to say big thank you to Contextile for having me today, and all the technical effort to put me in this conference remotely even. It is a really pity I cannot visit Portugal this time, but hope I have a next chance to visit. So as introduced, I'm going to talk about the Center for Heritage and Textile as a new ventures, the art center related to textile. And as introduced, my background is contemporary art curator. So therefore, for me, the working on the textile material subject matters, big adventure to dive into the world of the textile. So it would be nice if I can tip of them to share the tip of my venture with you today. Let me share my screen. Could you I think so you need to allow me to share my screen. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can you see my slide? Hello?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. The chat is a nickname of Center for Heritage Arts and Textile. And so the Y Textile Art Center in Hong Kong, that is also related to the memory of place. So unlike China, Hong Kong didn't produce, the luxury, the silk gown or textile, with the long crafted traditions. Instead, Hong Kong textile history was really short, and but actually contributed to establish the cornerstone of the current Hong Kong through the industrial as an industrial engine. So the chat is in-house the cotton spinning mills, so-called Nanfun textile. Now I'm showing the picture of the Nanfun textile mills, which were taken in 1970s. So in the 1950s, many the capitalists and the workers migrated from the mainland to Hong Kong, and they started the business of the textile. So Nanfun was one of them. So the Nanfun Textile Mills was located in Fen Wan. It's known as the first industrial city in Hong Kong, and currently known as the satellite town for the many local peoples to live, to commute to the central Hong Kong. So this project is actually registered as industrial the heritage of UNESCO. So our founders, the Vanessa Chan, is a granddaughter of the founder of this Nanfun Textile Mills, decided to preserve this Nanfun Textile Mills and converted into the complex of the business and the culture a few years ago. So this was the building before renovation. Yeah. Then this textile factory stopped their business in 2008. Afterwards, they used as a storehouse for 10 years. Yeah, before that, they are producing the cotton yarn for local use and to export. And the renovation started in 2015. And yeah, this was the before renovation, and this is the after the renovation. And the rooftop turned into the public area. Yeah, so this is the mills after the renovation. And the chat is one of the key tenants of the mills, along with the other two peers. One of them is the Mills Fabrica. It's an incubation hub for the young startups related to the technology and textile. And the shop floor for the Hong Kong young startups to own the small shops and the retails. And the chat is a space for offering the cultural experience. So the chat has 1,500 square meters, and we have the 3 gallery spaces, along with the chat studio and chat lab and the chat lounge. And we take the textile as an agent, and as a kind of the agent to connect the heritage and contemporary art and design. So again, the textile, we take the kind of node to connect the cross-disciplinary agendas. So DHM Foundation Gallery, this is a permanent gallery space to tell the Hong Kong textile industry past. But again, we invited the contemporary design and art collective to design this space, because we wanted to make this space very active space, not a static, permanent display. So we put in the workshop and display table in the middle of the gallery, where we organize the workshop, the demonstrations, and giving the tactile experience to the visitors. Yeah, like that. Because it's, the cotton is such a familiar materials for everyone, but actually people, they don't know how raw cotton is processed into the yarn. So that we're giving the opportunity for people to experience how raw cotton is processed into the yarn, then transformed into the daily products or artistic, artistic pieces. And we also show the vintage products made in Hong Kong. Again, the Hong Kong didn't produce the luxury glamorous items. They produce everyday items like, the towel sheets, workers' uniform, the nappies, and etc. But we also could find the beauty and aesthetics in these everyday objects, And we also can find the story of the labels, before these products, the behind these products. And we also proactively invite the retired workers for our agent. So the ladies, they're showing the sliver. She was an ex-textile worker, not in this textile mills. And we happened to meet her and in the bathroom of this building because she was working as the cleaning lady. And one of my colleagues started to chit-chatting with this lady, and she discovered actually this lady was a former textile worker and knew how to operate the machine. So we did a we headhunt her to be our demonstrator, and she found out now our gallery space turned into the stage for her demonstration. And Gallery 1 and 2, we use for the seasonal exhibition, which we organize 3 times a year, spring, summer, and the winter. And the spring, we usually organize a thematic exhibitions, inviting the artists from having the Asia connections. Artists who are living in Asia or Asian diaspora, or non-Asian artists who are based in Asian regions. And the summer, we invite the solo artist to dive into his or her the artistic productions in relation to textile. And in winter, we highlight the textile or fashion design and the innovation. Yeah, and this is the scene from our inaugural show. Chat is very young art center, which we just opened March in 2019. And for the inaugural show, so we invited the 17 artists from Asia Pacific regions. And but they are not so-called the textile artists. Rather, they are contemporary artists using the textile material, exploring the contemporary agenda embedded in textile. So they are one of the artist collectives which we invite is a punk rock slap from Malaysia. They are also the activists, and they use the wood block prints and the t-shirts and for the wood block print, and to claim the social political matters in their society as well as in Hong Kong this time. And we also invite the photograph artists and the video artists as long as their artworks show the relationship with the textile. So you can see on the right-hand side, the top of right-hand side, the diameter scene, time measures of the picture of the beautiful natural fabric, which used for wrapping all the archive materials in India. And bottom pictures is the beautiful installations made by Norberto Roldán, Filipino artist. And at the back, you can see the flashy pink and the green wool fabric, which they actually imported from mainland China to Philippines, where they have the long traditions and the history of the local textile production. So you can also find the hanging beautiful artworks at the in front of the wool fabric, which were produced by the engineers, craftsmen in the island, one of the islands in the Philippines. But their productions facing the crisis because the local people started using the mass-produced cheap fabric imported from mainland China. So the left-hand side, you can see the big image. This is the installations made by the Thai artist Jakai Silpatul. He used the cheap garment sold in the fast fashion brand, and but made putting the beautiful embroideries. That image actually the critically mentions about the labor conditions in these the sweat factories. And the top right-hand side is the carpet installation made by Ade Dharmawan. Actually, he was appointed to the one of the artist director of the next documenta in Germany. So he made a survey about the history of wool carpet produced and used in the Southeast Asia, and as well as in Hong Kong. You know, the Hong Kong and the Southeast Asia tropical climate, actually we didn't need to use any wool carpet because it's the climate condition is very warm, and you don't need the wool carpet to make your room is warm. So he found out that when the wool carpet was started to be produced in these regions, this is the 1970s, when the economic started to be the better and the better, and the varying so-called middle class in the society. So each carpet showed how the economic condition has changed, and he also took the graph of the GNP in Hong Kong between 1950s to today. And bottom pictures show the installations by Satoru Aoyama, the Japanese artist. He's an embroidery artist, and using the old industrial sewing machine to make the really detailed embroidery. However, now he has rival. Is the machine embroidery machine controlled by artificial intelligence. So he juxtaposed the embroidery made by the machines and his handmade machine embroidery, and showing and questioning how we can how we value those two embroideries made by machine or hand. So the chat exhibitions, as you can see here, the textile exhibitions is questioning or interrogate why artists choose the textile material agenda to question what. And for the summer, we invited the N.S. Harsher, Indian artist. He's a painter at heart, but so he's rooted in India, the culture and traditions, and naturally he uses a textile material and the textile related to a gender for his artistic production. So the left-hand side, you can see that his largest installation, so-called Nations. He installed more than 190 sewing machines and putting his painting on the fabric. But painting showed the national flag, and connecting these sewing machines with the entangled yarn to show how textile the industry is connecting the nations, as well as generate the program. And he often used the fabric for his beautiful painting and in a very poetic way. So these two are newly made for the chat exhibitions, and he bought the very cheap the black fabric in the market and paint the universe onto it and making the beautiful piece of the work. And we also make the show of the Reiko Sudo, Japanese textile artist. And that was our first exhibitions inviting the textile designer. But instead of the showing the how beautiful textile, we show the making process, how textile are made. So we put her drawing and the sketches, and also the materials and the mock-ups, and we also made the kind of abstract the factories showing each textile is made with the audio and the visual. So this is also the challenge, how we can create a new way of the displaying the textile. To invite the people to engage with this material and also the process of the production. So we had the first anniversary year this spring. And again, we invited the 7 contemporary artists to make the exhibition so-called the entitled Unconscious Textile, Stitching Method Crossing Ideas. And that shows again to present how contemporary artists use the textile material, textile subject matters, and the techniques with the unexpected the way. And left-hand side, you can see the B. London's Chinese artists' immersive installations. She makes the beautiful textile works for the wall hangings and the carpet, as well as an animation. And for her latest work is a crochet, interweaving with the LED light to make the beautiful pattern. And the right-hand side is a large painting by the Kato Izumi. But if you take a closer look, he also putting the stitch and the embroidered on the surface of the painting to giving the three-dimensional effect on the surface. Oops. Okay. Yeah. So, and this is another way of the installation and showing. Well, the Izumi, again, with his new pieces, he showed here how flexibly he can change the shape and the form by using the textile. And the other artists made the costume for his performance piece, and as well as using the textile to make the temporary theater for his video installation. And the Kawita Botanical is a Thai artist. She used her body to mimic the machine movement of the textile production. And left-hand side, the Hamukyunga's piece, the first glance, it looks like the painting, but actually these are the hand-embroidered pieces made by the North Korean artisans. The South Korean artists, of course, she cannot directly commission to the North Korean artisan to make this embroidered piece. So she had to use the middleman to send her design and has to, pay the middleman and the smuggle the artworks into the other stuff and have to spend the very, very painful time to wait. And so all the stressful time and the pains are ingredients of the artworks. And the right top image is a David Medard's piece. The so-called Stitching in Time was made in 1968 and ongoing piece. And he made a different version in the different cities. And this is a very early participatory work, inviting people to stitch whatever they want. So this time we went through the very, very challenging period of time in Hong Kong, the coronavirus and social upheaval time. So after the show, so the big fabric become the archive of the period of the time which we went through. And the bottom part, you can see the Kim Byron's painting. Looks like the very beautiful earthy color painting, but well, actually, instead of using the brush, he dyed the fabric with the natural color to make the this subtle color, which actually the skin tone of the people. So therefore, we invite the artists to explore the textile technique to crystallize their conceptual idea. Yeah, so we also organize a lot of the community programs, giving the opportunity for the people to engage into the production process. So, yeah, this is a grand opening. And we also invite the migrant workers to make their statue to celebrate their labor. Yeah, sorry, I think it's, my time is running over. So lastly, I wanna invite you to our research grant. And we also they're enthusiastic to grow up the future scholars and the researchers and the practitioners. We are calling to the research grant applicants and who are interested in making a new narrative on the industrial textile history on Hong Kong and beyond. So we still have the more than 6 months for the deadlines. If you are interested in, please come to visit our website. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mizuki, for your excellent presentation and also for sharing with us that opportunity of the prize. I kindly ask you for you to stop sharing the screen, otherwise the other artists will not allow to. Thank you so much. And now we are going into the speed talks. There are faster talks, presentations. And I'm glad to welcome Dorina Oratau from Romania. Dorina is also exhibiting in the international exhibition in Palacio Villaflor with the piece Natal.
Good morning. I have emotions.
In here.
Yes. For screen, full screen, or full screen, yeah.
It's here.
Yes. The theme released this year at Contextile Place of Memory allows me to present some projects and works I've done over time in order for my works to gather stories and memories or forgotten places, faces, or stories. The presentation contains three distinct sections in which three are briefly exemplified several series of my works over the years. Like many contemporary artists who work with fiber, I strive to see and look for beauty where no one noticed it I am especially concerned with the composition of the architectural space and the integration of the textile gesture as a symbol of and accent of the place. I approach the blade of the grass and the dry leaf and the ground because they are being trampled by everyone. They were handy, and it was hard for me to throw them away, so I tried to find a way to make the most of them. Grass and leaves are living materials with which you can dialogue, which have a memory, which transform without forgetting and can become a symbol of feelings or places. Each piece has a particular story behind it. Thus, in the personal exhibition After Grass, we talk about approaching and displacement and to keep in touch with my past. I moved and gathered the grass in the yard of the house to keep in a settlement made of a carpet fabric that preserves and recalls the memory of the place where I lived. In Parasite, a homage project commentary of a historical place, Weaver's Bastion in Brașov, Romania, the grass fabric becomes a symbol for the recovered tradition, a tradition that we tend to ignore. Just we give to a part, we threw or ignored the grass. The paper conglomerate is recovered from the editorial office and architecture magazine. The field petals come from a bouquet of flowers. The knotted strips are torn from an old inch, received at arms from grandparents. With the help of the artistic experiment, the recovered materials takes on another form of existence, is brought to a new life, and has the power to re-become current, to be in the center of attention again. The conformation of the working material is raw, primitive, sincere, because the grass, the leaf, the paper, or the textile scraps are my dialogue partners. I do not force the material to take an artistic form detected by me, but only emphasizes bring to the fore its qualities. The form of presentation, attachment, or display is combined with other complementary materials that emphasize support or the contrary contrast with the qualities of the textile. The simpler geometries and shapes detected by the straight line show the role of unique sample texture with the tactile, visual, or olfactory qualities of the material. By its nature, the textile object has the capacity to be mobile, foldable, remoldable. I can get a different presentation formula. I can be reinvented every time differently in differently composed spaces. the form of exposure in the interior or exterior spaces are part of the display and presentation area of the textile pieces. The interventions dress up the interior and exterior space, all floor, facade, or build shapes. They make a common body with the given place and its data. At Casa Ion Mincu, a landmark memorial space in the history of Romanian architecture, where old things are preserved and displayed with honor. We presented blankets, 3 barks and old sheets from north of Moldavia. These were to be thrown away. The intervention wanted to reveal to the weaver another perspective of the authentic Romanian textile object. The image is in this image. Because today, too fast, the traditional homemade fabrics are forgotten or set aside to make room for other cheap textiles brought from abroad. Each interior or exterior space has specific features. Based on them, I insert the intervention special composition of each textile ensemble. The arrangement of the piece had the role of directing the internal circulation of the visitors, guiding them on certain routes that would have included possible exception to the exhibited object. Okay. The Parasite, the image is here, and Iarba de la Palat ensemble multimedia and performance installation are comments addressed to some historical places, the Weaver's Bastion from Brașov and Brancovan Palace Mogoșoaia, that investigate the relations between the built element and the natural element. It's immediate. The grass material becomes a symbol for the recovered tradition, a tradition we tend to ignore just as put aside, throw away, or ignore the grass. With said that once belonged to my grandparents, I moved the grass in the outer courtyard of the historic buildings, only to later integrate into the fabrics, which I display in the inner courtyard or inside the building. The intervention emphasized the fusion of the artist with the history, the memory, and the ambience of the place. I have a short video. For the exhibition. Okay. The part 2, the second part, presents the series of my works, 16 square meters made in the last 6 years. It refers to the memory of the work studio, a space inhabited by members of my family. The 16 square meters series research related to an n-dimensional representation of some personal states and to the questioning of themes such memory, trauma, schizoid feelings. The environment is a background, a microcosm, meant to reproduce the inner world and rebuild circumstances and situations 2001 and 2008 years. They are now exhibited and confessed in an open, common environment. The author slides from private to public, trying an exercise of personal redefinition in relationship with art, with the world now and close to her, and exercise of retrieving emotions and events experienced and at their culminating point back then, not reviewed and interpreted from far away. The work, its nothingness, variable sequences, guerrilla family, possible life. Nothingness, the calm and the mirroring water discover the existence of non-existence. During 6 years, the artist is forced by circumstances to live together with the family in the 16 square meters of her art studio. The discourse of the artwork is based on the description of contradictory states and the search for preserving the balance of a man in front of the daily bombardment of responsibilities, social, professional, relational, domestic. The work variable, and the tail. Segmentation, the wall to the left of the black room contains data from this period. The wall and at the end of the room has a video presenting the work Possible Life. Guerrilla family is a construction assemblage, wood, textile, mechanical embroidery. And this bed of my restlessness traveled and interpreted it the banner of my family's countless experience. Possible life, an amalgam of warm clothes from which water flows continuously. I have a video, a short video for finally, excuse me, because I find, okay. The last part presents two projects of intervention and temporary installation in public space made especially from some interior or exterior spaces in which the intervention area dictates the type of artistic object proposed by the author artist. Here and beyond, an aggressive visual signal, a soft barrier which hides, reveals in a participatory way the daily reality. The individual personal mark of the man caught between the two realities, the noise of the city and the calm of nature, between the architectural geometry of the utilitarian space, of conception and the landscape order of retreat that the public garden offers. Second project. The project, I collaborate an architect, Cristina Olga Gociman. An artistic installation that starts from a sublimated vision of nature will be brought up to date by the architectural and technological themes and an eco dimension. And the project is a virtual project because I don't have the accept for the municipality. And this is my presentation. Thank you for attention. Okay.
Thank you so much, Darina. Now we are going to see the communication from Renata Meirelles from Brazil. Renata is not here, so we will show you the communication that she sent to us, and with the title Subjectivity as a Power Source of the Animate.
Em primeiro lugar, quero agradecer pela oportunidade de estar aqui virtualmente com vocês. Infelizmente, não estou presencialmente na Contextile, evento que celebra a arte têxtil e nos conecta. Obrigada a todos os organizadores e participantes. Vamos falar de memórias, o subjetivo como potência do fazer manual. Meu nome é Renata Meirelles, moro em São Paulo, Brasil. Sou artista plástica de formação e desenvolvo um trabalho têxtil autoral, investigando novas práticas e ressignificando antigas, práticas têxteis que vão além do fio e da trama. Vou mostrar artistas e comunidades no Brasil e na África que participam de projetos e merecem ser conhecidos. Um convite para compartilhar com vocês uma abordagem sobre diferentes trabalhos que eu conheci, vivenciei e valorizo. Vou começar falando do meu trabalho. Renata Meirelles, Diários, Memórias de Papel. Um resgate de memórias e afetos. Uma série que escolhi um material com significado. São folhas e diários da minha mãe. Minha mãe perdeu conexão com suas memórias. Sofria do mal de Alzheimer. Em seus últimos dias de vida, foi se desligando aos poucos. No final, pouco falava. Lembro-me quando em seu quarto, em silêncio, ela bordava no ar, sem linha e sem agulha, costurava no espaço repetidamente a memória de um gesto. Mesmo já perdendo as suas memórias e com problemas de cognição, o que restou foi o gesto de bordar e costurar, que fizeram parte de toda a sua vida. Nessa série de diários, Memórias de Papel, abordo o tema da memória e do efêmero. Este projeto está intimamente ligado à minha mãe, e na minha intenção de imortalizar suas memórias e ressignificá-las. Uma tentativa poética de unir os fragmentos destas memórias e a intenção de garantir que todas as lembranças formassem um só corpo, imortalizando todos esses escritos preciosos. Páginas antigas resgatadas, que compõem uma série de objetos e instalações tridimensionais. Um trabalho cheio de história e memória. Não há uma linearidade nos processos da memória. Ela pode ser entendida como um texto a ser decifrado. Clarice Borian, a menina que borda folhas. A história de Clarice começa com um projeto onde as folhas foram transformadas em seu suporte. Poéticas têxteis. Ela fala através das folhas. Junto com o bordado, ela cria uma nova forma de expressão. Folhas secas, simbolizando a relação com o frágil da vida, com nossa efemeridade, com nossas memórias. O gesto de bordar é frequentemente associado à intimidade, à subjetividade, à lenta temporalidade de um fazer com as mãos, que está conectado ao tempo. Clarice, em seu trabalho, também faz ações coletivas. Reúne pessoas em praças ou lugares públicos para bordar e refletir sobre a preservação e a importância da nossa conexão com a natureza. A poesia de Clarice Borian oferece várias camadas de significado. Clarice dá vida às folhas e nos mostra que tudo está conectado. Inês Chertel, o ritual da lã, a apropriação da cadeia completa. Inês mudou-se de São Paulo e foi morar no sul do Brasil. Ela cuida de um rebanho de mais de 400 ovelhas que fornecem a matéria-prima para realizar seu trabalho, a lã, que é selecionada e processada até receber várias formas, novos usos e significados. A técnica usada é ancestral, aprendida em várias viagens em que Inês trabalhou com os nômades. Essa arte é tão antiga que apareceu antes de se inventar o tear há mais de 6.000 anos. Inês trabalha a lã rusticamente, esfregando as fibras, dando vida e forma a ela. A feltragem é um trabalho lento, paciente e ritualista. Prática primitiva, onde memórias são resgatadas e ressignificadas. Seu trabalho é o resultado de um processo manual, produzido com respeito por cada etapa. As cores são obtidas através do uso de plantas e cascas de árvores da região. Inês tem um processo único que valoriza o uso de um material tão nobre como a lã. O desenvolvimento de uma poética ligada a tempos remotos, onde o tempo passa devagar. O tempo está relacionado a cada etapa dos ciclos da natureza. A artista contribui para um estilo de vida em coerência com este novo tempo, produzindo o perene em vez do descarte, e em seu processo, a lã fala. Ela é a protagonista. A Maria, por Mayumi Ito, conectando pessoas através de retalhos. Agora, vamos para Muzambinho, uma região de Minas Gerais que foi produtora de algodão e café no passado, onde viveu seu apogeu. O projeto A Maria, iniciado em 2003, com a artista Mayumi Ito, reúne um grupo de artesãs de Muzambinho trabalhando, criando juntos um novo modo de vida para os membros da comunidade, resgatando técnicas antigas e criando novas. Artesãos plantam, cardam, fiam, tingem e tecem, realizam todo o processo. Desde o início, Mayumi trabalhou com corantes naturais e tintura vegetal de fios e tecidos de algodão. O grupo utiliza o café e outros descartes da natureza, como folhas, frutos e cascas, também como matéria-prima para os tingimentos. O objetivo da equipe Maria nasceu através de habilidades herdadas e aprendidas do universo feminino, aprendendo pelas mãos habilidosas das avós, em um universo de cooperação, colaboração e troca de conhecimento e respeito a cada passo, onde todos se envolvem a partir de uma escala individual para a criação e produção do grupo. Essa é uma história de reuniões entre pessoas de várias faixas etárias ao redor do fazer têxtil, um projeto que colocou luz sobre o papel da produção colaborativa no Brasil. Renato Imbroise, o têxtil nas comunidades, um intercâmbio de culturas e fazeres entre Brasil e África. Renato realiza um trabalho há mais de 10 anos onde resgata práticas têxteis em comunidades africanas. Elas fazem tapetes tecendo com os dedos, utilizam restos de capulanas, que são tecidos tipicamente africanos e multicoloridos, usados por todos na comunidade. Utilizam como referência a imensa variedade dos trançados de seus cabelos em seus bordados. Desenham com agulhas. Tecidos de algodão cru são bordados com motivos criados a partir de suas memórias e cenas do cotidiano. Elas cantam enquanto trabalham. Ingressam em um espaço de troca coletiva, em uma possibilidade de ampliar conhecimentos. Materiais como fibras naturais e a palha estão presentes na construção de suas moradias. Os conhecimentos usados na construção se aplicam no uso da técnica da cestaria. As peças produzidas são uma forma de fortalecer o que fazem na comunidade em que vivem, seus valores e suas memórias. Um trabalho que cria conexões. A importância do que é feito, como é feito e com quem é feito, usando materiais regionais e trabalhando com questões da comunidade. O que é produzido mostra uma voz, um pertencimento e um valor. Trocas de conhecimento e reconhecimento de tantas semelhanças entre povos que possuem tantos vínculos, memórias materiais e imateriais, que se preservam ao longo do tempo. A valorização do fazer e a pluralidade do ser, conexões com pessoas, lugares, cheiros, sabores e saberes. Memórias que constroem a identidade de um povo. Há bilhões de anos atrás não havia fronteiras entre os continentes. É a Pangeia. Tudo estava conectado. Nossas raízes nos conectam a uma camada mais profunda, convocando o subjetivo e trabalhando nossas emoções. Em nossas memórias mais profundas, sabemos que fronteiras não existem. O movimento de cada um afeta o outro. Fazemos parte. Obrigada.
Thank you so much, Renata Meirelles. Now it's time for a conversation with the artists. If you have some questions to put, please feel comfortable to do that. I remind you that we have some artists among us. We still have Magda Sobon. She presented the talk yesterday. Dorina is here also. Janice, Jeffries, and Inês Jorge. And also it's with us Magdalena Klasinska will going to present her talk in a few moments. There is any question? So, yes?
Can I make an observation?
Yes, let's be waiting for the micro.
Can I take this off? Thank you. Yes, well, I was really very moved by all the presentations. And I'm was particularly interested in the relationship with architecture and home. And I think what I observe is a rethinking of the kind of ethnography of tool making and place through reimagining it in an contemporary gallery environment. And I wonder if this is something you have observed, in other places or situations. I thought that was really interesting, that reimagining of the so-called ethnographic. And it comes through in the collective works, I think we've seen, which is to reimagine the type of old methods with new production to make different livelihoods. And those were the two things that struck me very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice, for your comment. Yes, there is a new significance of the space through the materials and also through the textile thoughts, I think. Anyone else want to make a comment or a question? So maybe if you have further questions for us, you can email to our Contextile email, and then we will try to answer to you. But right now, I would like to invite you to make a break. We will make a coffee break, and we will come back at 11:30. Hello, welcome to the second part of Textile Talks, Contextile 2020. In this second part, we will have the presentations by the artists who have been here during the artistic residencies in Contextile. We will have Angelina Nogueira, Madalena Klesinska, Michel Laurent, Mylène Boisvert e Paulina Almeida. We will start with the presentation of Angelina Nogueira. Estão aqui as fotos. Thank you.
Esperem aí, fiquei presa. Hello, good morning. Cláudia, desculpa, preciso da tua ajuda aqui. Não estou a conseguir selecionar tudo, não sei porquê.
O que é que queres abrir? Uma?
Quero abrir todas e pôr em... Desculpa, não era isto. Espera aí. Queria pôr mesmo... Ok, está aqui a apresentação. Sorry. Okay. So this is my work. It calls from fiber. The name comes from an expression that we have to refer to strong and resilient people. We used to say fiber people, and I use that name because it refers to the textile material, and I will work with these two concepts about people and stories, people's stories, and about the material, and on an experimental way. The work is an installation and an artistic book, and it happens on a process divided on two main parts. The first part is a work with the community, where I talk with people and I ask to bring some textile objects for I work with. The second part was the practical work on studio, where I do all the practical work and all the experimental things. I started the first stage with some little interviews with the people, like informal interviews. And I asked for that objects, and I heard that stories, because it's very important for me to know about what people say to decide it how the way I have to take on the second stage of the work. So I took that pieces and I tried to transform it into something new. Doing some new compositions, and try to make it into a new narrative for fragmentation and for a transformation of scale and things like that. I used all materials discarded from local factories, the strings, the threads, and the fabrics. And it's very important for me to use that kind of materials. I used to do that in almost all the works that I have. And it's all about the concept too, because when I work with the stories and the old objects, it's like giving a new life to this. And also with the space, I feel the same. I feel that I was putting something into an empty space and giving some to that space. That's why I choose that kind of kitchen room. It's a room that has a part that reminds a lot a home, and that was very important for me too. During all the period of the work, of the practical work, I was doing my prints and paints and some draws, but at the same time I went to the room, to the exhibition room, to put it on space, to try it, to putting out again, and always trying things like that. Always recombinated all the images. I use it as techniques, mostly print, because for me it's very important the concept about the mark, to put some mark. And I'm very interested in the investigation about the material, about the textile material as a matrix, not only as a support, not only as a material or sculptural material, but also like a matrix, like we can do all with the fabrics. And it comes because of my last work, my last investigation, which called matter matrix support, and it reflects about all of this, and I put that concept on that work too. I made some matrix with the strings, based on the images that I took from the materials and the stories. And I have to say that the stories gave me not only the images that I put, that I worked with the photography, and in all the process I used various mediums, but also the stories. I try to put it into a visual way, like taking some details, some visual details about that conversations, and I try to put into images. Okay, and with all of this, I think the most important it's to talk about the way that kind of images came. It came sometimes a little disguised, and sometimes they are very strong. I try to combine these two concepts, the big fabrics, only with color and with texture, but sometimes we can see some little details. It's like when you are on the place, you are always finding something new. You can always see something different, even in the places that are not so usual to see. I try to do some kind of light box, and even on the back side of the light box, I have some details to see. And that's it. I try to give the opportunity to have a lot of different readings about the work. And at the end, I think that even it became into something very different that it came at first. I think that sometimes we can see something that is very transversal of the idea of textile. And that's it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelina. Now, I would like to welcome Magdalena Klesinska from Poland, another artist who have been here with us about in a month, working on Convento dos Capuchos in an artistic residency.
Yes, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Magdalena Klesinska. I live in Poland, work in the University of the Arts in Poznań as a PhD assistant. As Claudia said, I was the one of few artists in the residency in the Capuchos, and I prepare 3 works during my residency. First, because I also prepared the presentation, so you will see it. But first, I wanted to highlight some information that I wanted you to focus on. So, Manfred Lurker said that we desperately want to enrich our world, that we, as a human, want to find out is there something else beyond our dimension, and of course, we want to find out how to get there. The main question that I put for this project were. So the first, I assume that everything is connected, that the past, the present, the future, but are there only these 3 aspects? So how about the different dimension, but not like the astral one, but more close to the hierophany, be between, be beyond, but still together? My project for the artistic residency is about the state, about 2 sides of the same moment, about the sacrum and the profanum time, but not only in the religion aspect. About, of course, the positive and the negative, as you saw maybe at the exhibition and you will see at the presentation. Also about the repetition, the emotion that we experience in everyday life that lead us to the other states of our memory. I have been studying the meaning of the proto-symbols in the different cultures, and I was touching the different micronets that were connected to my subject. It appeared that most of the elements, thoughts, symbols, and myths have, of course, more or less the same background, and the many of everyday elements that we have being used can be the item or the artifacts of the representation of hierophany. So, referring to this unnatural condition, during my residency, I focus on this topic, and during releasing my artworks, I got the inspiration from the museum collection in Guimarães, from the Alberto Sampio, from the Archaeological Museum, and of course from the space that I was working, so the Convento de Capuchos. So the place of the memory, which is the main subject and the reason to start thinking wider for me, it was not a specific place, was not one specific object that reminds us about some moment, event, or story, but it was a group of micronets, of micro-touch, and of micro-elements that when we combine them and connect them, we create a full picture of the area. So I have been focused on these little elements and create my own story by my own method, story about the place, about the Guimarães, about the pastime, about the sacrament profanum size. Of course, I had to focus only on a few aspects and picked only the few ways. It was impossible to work and connect them all together because of this short period of time. So I will just start showing you and telling about my first project that I done. So in this short enter that I made, I tried to describe the topic that I was working on for this residency. For the first artwork that I called Beyond, I made a series of sketches, documentation, mapping the items and the artworks that are connected to artifacts and elements from the museum collection. I wanted to get the inspiration from the forms, shapes, material, colors, and history background. The stories that are behind the museum items were good for the beginning, to start thinking about creating new objects that will be a transformation, will be the hybrids and the mutation from the original one. At the beginning, because of the situation with COVID-19, I was working at my home studio in Poland. The art director, Claudia Melo, was helping me to connect with a lot of people, mandarin directors, museum staff, to get the digital photos, link and documents about the museum collection, museum items. After doing research for this project, the artifacts from the museum collection, I choose the textile and the fiber. Most of the artifacts, as you can see, this I have only few images about this. I choose only few images, were from 50 to 17th century. After that, I started to thinking how to transform and translate the historical items to move them from one side to another, from everyday life, everyday moments, and how they are connected to this sacral and profane world. I was thinking about which kind of items are the most basic and casual and appear in two sides, two spheres. I stopped at the simple clothes, motif of shirts and dresses. I transformed them to the symbols made of the aluminum sheet. But I didn't want to repeat them directly, but referring them to the sign and diversity and attribute, make them as icons. So I made them flat slides as a positive and negative, that they completed each other. Now you can just see the prototype and that I make from the paper first. And the process stages for process working. Thank you, Claudia, for the photo, because we will not have the documentation. And this is what you can see, and of course this is what you can see at the exhibition. This is the final artworks. I also chosen from photos from the exhibition. Maybe I picked too much. Sorry. I just finish it. Okay, the second project, the next artwork that I create on this artistic residency, I called Hidden, and has been the combination of the thinking about the Convento de Capuchos in Guimarães and the confessional room and the old ceramics that are the fragments of the reconstructed pots that we can see in the Archaeologist Museum. Before I started to work, I put, of course, the question, and the question was, how many people in the Capuchos had told their stories in the confessional since 1662? How many secrets stay in this spot? How many of the most hidden mysteries have been confessed in this place? And if you can put the confessions in the vassals, how many of them will appear? in my artwork, which is of course part of the Beyond series, the main subject that I pick, I'm trying to provide the idea, the metaphoric way of the left secrets that are captured in the ceramic spots. The inspiration for these sisal artifacts had been taken from the ancient ceramics, the fragments you can see on the photos, from the museum collection from the Archaeologist Museum Martin Sarmento in Guimarães, where you can see a lot of fragments of their ceramics that came from the 8th century before Christ, from the area of the city. The historical purpose for this ceramic vessel in the past in one profanum site was very simple and clear. They had been used as posts and pitches so as the main everyday life items, but on the sacrum sites, they have their mystery and more sacral purpose as a urn in funeral rites, where all the ashes and whole life stories and secrets were being hidden. And this is the place that I put my sisal pots in confessional's room in Capuchos. And the last project that I work on, I called Together at the Table. It had to appear as a group project when every artist in residency, so Angelina, Paulina, Patricia, Milen, Michelle, Julia, Barbara, and I would participate. The idea of the artwork was was a summary and short note of the meaning about the main subject, thematic concept, so the place of the memory. I invited the artists to the table and asked them to fill the plate with their own thoughts, association, ideas, that to make a dinner where we all told each other about our own interpretation of the topic. I prepared the tablecloths made from the cotton material, handmade dyed, with the 8 bleaches circle space, one for each artist. My idea was that every artist will make a mark, fill the plates by their own thoughts. But because of we couldn't meet together, I thought that we could meet at the table by other means, correspondency. I collected the idea, projects, thoughts from the artists and embroidered it by my own, trying to be as close as the idea as I could be. So thank you. And from this place, of course, I want to also thank you for the opportunity to be in the residency in Guimarães. Thank you very much. I don't know how to, I will just.
Because we are going to receive Michel Laurent from Quebec. We're now connecting with Canada. Hi, Michel.
How are you?
How are you?
Fine. You?
We are very well.
Yes, okay.
Thank you so much for being there for Contextile Talks. We are also very curious about your presentation.
Yeah, okay. So I will start my document, yes? With PowerPoint, okay. Okay, like, okay. So, it's okay? No? Okay. Okay. Okay, share screen. Share. Okay. That's it. So Okay. So for the presentation, I will close my camera and I will go back at the end, okay? Okay. Hi, good morning. My name is Michelle Lorrain, and I live in Quebec in a village named St. Louis, a village located on the south side of the St. Lawrence River. I was invited by the Biennale Internationale du Lin de Portneuf to participate in this artist residency at Contextile. I will begin with a few words about my practice. Next, I will show you some of the works I've made over the past few years, including the one presented at the Bill in 2078. I will then talk about my residency experience and my project at Contextile before finishing by reading a short text about textile and plants. La Surface des Jours is an installation made with clock boxes and large reflective surfaces, such as the windows of office buildings. My work is linked to the practice of drawing, installation, and video, and it reflects time and it is organized according to the space in which it evolves. It focuses on the form of inhabiting, ways of perceiving vernacular architecture, or imagining built spaces. I am interested in the double, the memory of places, and the territories that are being transformed. Depending on the projects, I vary strategies, visual practices, and materials by developing, if necessary, tools in situ, by having everything that is available on the site and can be used. The Cistern is a video installation that relates the dismantling of a water tank as a phenomenon of frenetic urbanization. I have presented my video near the location where was the water tank in an historic vegetables vault, also threatened by demolition. I am looking for places and architectures that are sensitive to the folds of time and space. Through my installations, I solicit collective memories and objects that have disappeared or failed in a public space. I have always been very attentive to the way in which the works are set up in a specific place. My work has evolved towards the practice of installation by multiplying the types of supports and in situ interventions. My practice is nourished by notions of territory, place, duration, and trace. For the bill, I created an installation with video that presents the daily path that we take every day that we don't really notice anymore. There are drawings in space that define us as an imprint on or a way of expressing ourselves. I use the tricotin, which is a child's toy, to trace the path with linen thread. When the Bild invited me to take part of the Biennale Contextile, I wanted to take up the technique of tricotin and pursue this idea of invisible traces that we draw in space. My project for Contextile is named Peregrinations. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I could not make it to Guimarães. So the residency in Portugal was transposed here in my studio in St. Louis. At the beginning, I focused on the value of work and the energy expenditure put into image by the distant travel between home and workplace. Over time, I rather thought about the value of work in the sense of an energy dedicated to something or someone appreciate, with the idea of caring. And I opted for journeys that really matter to the person who does it. I asked the other artists in residence and friends who lived in Quebec and in Guimarães to draw me a meaningful route for them, with a few images and a brief presentation. I then reproduced these routes on recycled tarpaulins put into the shape of a house. I used the tricotin to trace the routes and transpose the proposal onto tarpaulins now installed on the outside wall of the chapel of the Convento das Capuchas. I am very sensitive to the material used to support work. While searching online, I came across a tent, an old cotton tent. On the tent, you can see the marked wood and the inscription "Made in Canada." It gave me the idea of reproducing a forest inside the tent, still using the tricotin, in the colors of the boreal forest. The tent is set up in a room inside the convento with windows overlooking the outside wall of the chapel with the other suspended tarpaulins. Here in progress in my studio, it holds secured by ropes and occupies the width of the room. A large green tarpaulin comes with the tent. It belonged to my father who repaired it many, many times. It is dark green, all patched, and represents a territory in itself. For me, it's a place of memory. In the upper part of the tarpaulin, I have drawn the two paths that I make every week in the forest that surrounds me where I live. To find my exhibition space, I went through the photos Claudia sent us of the Convento das Capuchas. It's not easy to do things from distance, but Claudia's response was always quick and efficient. It helped a lot. I like the idea of weaving that we can transpose into the bonds that unite us. That's why I added a travel bag filled with tricotin made on both sides of the Atlantic to my installation. And I take this opportunity to thank all those who participate in Guimarães in making tricotin to fill my travel bag. It's a way of getting together, even if we didn't have the chance to really rub shoulders during the residency. I like the idea of coming together despite some form of anonymity. I find it a part of the value of the work. It's an effort that leads to a totally free gesture. Once my peregrination project was finished, I came across a text by Tim Ingold, a British social anthropologist who relates in his book Marcher avec les dragons, the work and thought of Wilhelm Plasser, Czech philosopher. In his book, translated in French from German, Petite Philosophie du Design, he expresses the essence of my project around the tent and the path traced on the tarpaulins hanging on the outside wall of the chapel. This text is about the tent and the weaving material it is made of. Plasser distinguishes between two types of walls, the generally woven wind wall and the solid wall built from heavy material. For him, this difference corresponds to the difference between a tent and a house. Plasser argues that it's within the enclosure formed by the four solid walls of the house that things become property. This property is bounded by walls. The tent, on the other hand, is an aerodynamic structure that would probably fly away if it was not fixed, tied, or anchored to the ground. Its canvas walls are primarily designed to withstand the wind. As a place sheltered from the wind, or even in a turbulent environment, the tent is like a nest in a tree, a place where men, women, and experience gather, intermingle, and disperse in a way that resembles precisely the processing of fibers in a manufacture of the material from which the tent's canvas walls are made. In fact, the very word canvas suggests to Plasser a textile that is open to all experiences, open to the wind, to the spirit, and that stores them. The house, built on solid ground, is to the tent offered to the wind, what the confinement of our possession to the shelter of the world is to the weaving of the path of life in the world. The tent fabric that swells in the wind collects experience, milks it, and emits it, and it is because of this that the tent is a creative nest, writes Plasser, relates steaming gold, and feed food. In closing, I would like to thank the artists in residence, Angelina, Magdalena, Milan, the video artists Odile and Denis, and Marta and her family from Guimarães for their collaboration in relating their roots. Thank you. And to Dominique Roy from the Build, and Claudia and Contextile for making me live this unique experience in the close distance of our respective universe. Thank you very much.
For your excellent presentation. We also will have the chance to visit the work of Michel during the guided visits this afternoon. I kindly ask you to stop sharing the screen because now we are going to have the presentation from Mylène Boisvert, also from Quebec.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Mylène. Welcome to Textile Talks.
Thank you.
We are waiting for your presentation.
Perfect. Oops. Does it work? Yes. Okay, so I start. So first of all, I am very happy that we decided to do this artistic residency at a distance in a period of uncertainty where several events were cancelled. And I have learned a lot from this experience, and I am rich of the encounters I have made with you and also those I have made in my community through this project. And even though I have worked far away from you, I have been delighted by the efficiency of each of the interventions we have made. When we first met on Zoom, Claudia told us that you would be our eyes and hands in Guimarães to accompany us with our project, and had no doubt about it. Each virtual meeting and document shared by emails has greatly nourished my practice for the realization of the work, and I thank you for that. So I will present the process of the realization of the work in my studio in Montreal. And I wish I could have taken more time to discuss with you and the artist in residence during the materialization of the work. So this is a great opportunity to share some of the studio experience and my thoughts on the theme Places of Memory. So I started the work on June 10th, and on the picture, you can see the materials with which I did my first explorations. In my practice, I work mainly with locally handmade linen paper that I transform into yarn. And with this yarn, I make works inspired by different aspects of the history of textiles. I often draw inspiration from techniques and structures to make personal interpretation through different projects. So the title of my work for Contextile is Tracing Places. And you can see the first sketches of it in my notebook on the table. So the artwork Tracing Places represents the topology of a garden next to which I lived during the 90s and early 2000s in Montreal. It was located in the backyard of this house, you can see on the picture, and my neighbor at the time was the owner. I lived on the ground floor and she lived on the floor above. And she and her husband had immigrated to Canada from Portugal in the late 50s, and they had renovated this house. And inside, I could see patterns and colors and details in the architectures that were reminiscent of their homeland. And in the garden, I enjoyed watching the many ferns from early spring to late fall before the snow came. So one day my neighbor Maria left to go live with her children. And then I left within a year after her departure. And following my departure, the new owners completely transformed the place. So I have only one picture of the front of the house and none of the garden as I knew it. So the topology in question is drawn from memory, and it represents the contours of the fern garden. So with this project, my intention is to overlay this topology on top of the floor of the Convento de Santo Antonio dos Capuchos. And when I saw the first images of the convent, I was seduced by its history and particularly by the transformation of the hospital that occupied it. I like the idea of moving the topology of the beloved garden and taking it to Guimarães to lay it on the floor of the old hospital. And in a way, it is a reminder of all those beloved places that no longer exist or are being transformed. So the memory of this garden drove me to create this piece, and it is also a tribute to Maria's garden. And a second concept I wanted to address is the significant place of botany in the history of textiles. Plants are often the patterns, fibers, dyes, the coatings, and sometimes even the tools we use. So as many of us, I am interested in the important relationship we have with plants through textiles. So for this project, it is the importance of the plant motifs and particularly the ferns that inspired me. And for this reason, I also wanted to learn more about the traditional embroidery of Guimarães and the botanical motifs that compose them. So when we learned that we were going to do the residency from a distance, it was very important for me to still be able to meet with the embroiderers from Guimarães. And I wanted to learn more about this traditional technique. And I also wanted them to be able to take part in the creation of the work from a distance. So my initial search was made easier by the documentation Claudia sent me by email. I enjoyed reading about the history of the technique and was inspired by some of the aspects of these embroideries. The first element that inspired me is the embroideries embedded in the small squares and also the red thread used for them. And I also like this image, the one on the right, of a blouse pattern, which I found had graphic similarities with the topology of the garden. So it is from these elements that I started the work. The square shape and the color red were the main guideline for the realization of the work. The first few days, I drew in red ink on handmade linen paper, patterns inspired by the ferns in my garden. I was fascinated by this red color used for the embroideries, and I would have liked to be able to contemplate it in person with the natural light of Guimarães and in the presence of the embroiderers. My references being seen on my computer screen and in a book only, I started to make up a study of threads, trying to get closer to the one used for the embroideries and without the help of references such as Pantone. And I like that idea, and trying to replicate this red became an adventure in my summer. Sometimes my reds would move away from the real red to become pinks and oranges, or my reds would even become brownish, and then I would return it to trying to get closer to the real color. And so to imagine this red was also a metaphor to imagine the landscapes and the community of Guimarães. So we therefore organized 2 virtual meetings with the embroiderers, which were hosted by Claudia at the beginning of July. And in preparation for this first meeting, I prepared 2 documents to transmit to the embroiderers about the different possibilities to participate in the project. So the picture here is the second document. I suggested 3 ideas, leaving them the freedom to choose one or the other of the suggestions. And I was very happy that they agreed to participate in all of them. The first idea consisted in interpreting through embroidery some fern designs that I drew from my garden. The second was to share through writing an aspect of their passion for this traditional technique which they preserve and for which I would have liked to be in their presence to fully appreciate it. And the last one was to also draw a plant from their garden that I could also interpret. So while waiting for their creations, I worked on the production of linen paper yarn for the design of squares of different textures that I included in the work. I also applied red ink to these small paper laces. And concerning the inks that I chose to use for the piece, I have intentionally opted for those dedicated to calligraphy or writing letters. I like the idea of the correspondence started with the embroiderers and all the people involved in the project since the beginning of the pandemic. This medium was therefore of a great importance to me for this project. So a week later, we had our second meeting with the embroiderers and Claudia. The other artists in residence and myself were invited to an online workshop to learn this traditional technique. And I was also happy to learn more about the techniques and its history. So at the end of this virtual workshop, I had the surprise to see in front of my computer screen the 13 small embroideries made with the red thread, as well as the sketches and the sharing of stories about the embroidery of Guimarães. And I was speechless in front of the beautiful creation of Maria, Adelia, and Isabel, and I was already looking forward to seeing them again. So soon after, Claudia sent me all the documentation, and she took care of translating the text into English. So I had all the necessary elements to continue the construction of the work. I prepared a plan to be able to position each square. The squares identified by the letter B were reserved to be able to insert the embroideries of Maria, Adelia, and Isabel once the work would be in Guimarães. I also decided that the text and drawings that they made would be positioned in the circular part of the work so that they would be clearly visible and surrounded by whiteness. I transcribed the text that they gave me on both sides of a sheet of linen paper. At the bottom of this sheet, I wrote in French my acknowledgement for this sharing of textile know-how and for their participation in the work realized in response to Contextile 2020 for the theme Places of Memory and in the context of the pandemic. And then I cut out everything and then I turn it into yarn. And then I made those little squares. And here on this picture, you can see my interpretation of the sketches that I have reduced to fit into the squares. You can also see their placement in the artwork on the left. So for this layout, I wanted to make a link between the topology of the garden that I represent and the similarities with the blouse pattern that I saw in the book Bordado de Guimarães, especially in reference to the ornaments that are often positioned near the collar and therefore close to the heart. So on this picture, you can see a little bit of the process for the assemblage of the piece. And I used abaca paper thread for weaving the squares. So here you can see in the middle, you can see the placement of the text embedded in the thread and the squares, and also some of the steps of the assemblage of the work. So on this picture, these are the last days of the production, and throughout the work, I could see the squares one by one and then the horizontal rows, and little by little, the final construction. So it was in the very last days that I unfolded the work to see it in its entirety. And I wanted to spend some time with the work before sending it to Guimarães. So I decided to take a few hours to make a small border with the abaca paper that I sometimes colored in red. And this last intervention allowed me to take a short step back and continue my reflection on the theme Places of Memory. And I remember what I learned in the workshop on traditional embroidery of Guimarães about the history of the pattern used. And I appreciated knowing that these embroideries of red threads represent the plants that were once contemplated in the places where the technique developed. And in a way, this is what we have done with this project. Maria, Adelia, Isabel, and I sort of took the time to contemplate and draw the plants in our gardens. And from this exercise, a correspondence based on textile know-how and creation took place. And then the work left my place. And when it arrived in the convent dos Capuchos, the embroideries were added to the space reserved for them. And I warmly thank Maria, Delia, and Isabel for their participation. And I also thank the Contextile team who finalized this last step of the making. This addition of the embroideries is for me the perfect conclusion to this participatory project realized at a distance. So I thank you. That's it. And I also thank the BILP, Biennale Internationale du Lin de Portneuf, and Dominique Roy and all the team.
Thank you so much, Mylène, for your presentation and for your wonderful artwork. It was a long process in this distance artistic residencies at distance, but it was a very enrichment for all of us. Now we will have the last presentation for the artistic residency, Paulina Almeida, who is coming through the Magic Carpets platform. This is a partnership that Contextile have with this European project. We've invited Paulina as a local artist.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much, Claudia and Contextile, for having me here. It's a big honor to be back in my home city after 30 years of leaving this town with this very meaningful piece to me. It's in fact like it was a big challenge to be back on the hospital I was born. So the places of memory was very easily justified by being in residence literally the last years for hours and hours in this hospital room, making the WOMB, this piece that you will have the opportunity to visit, hopefully. I still don't have enough distance to see what this really meant to me, because it was a very transformative process. So I would start first with the idea of coming to the Contextile itself. My family has more than 100 years of tradition on textile, first handmade and then over generations in the industry itself. My grandfather still has walls of his own factory of textile. There was the moat to come here in between. With the situation with COVID, the situation changed, so we were proposed and challenged to also occupy other places, which was the case of the hospital in Convento dos Capuchos, where I was born in 78 as the first birth without pain in the city. So the doctors were a friend of my mother, and they decided also to try this, and also because she didn't want to have more pain. So, and with these elements and the challenge of Contextile and the curator Claudia, we had with my colleagues together the elements of memory and diagnosis also, and I mean, these places was for me very, very unique, and I think I of course in my whole professional life I didn't have all this cosmic crochet, I would say, like cosmic weaving of circumstances that took me to this. So the piece is a self-ethnographic installation, and it's composed of many parts. First, this idea of the birth of my mother when she shared this to me. Second, also with my father, he tried to explain me how the first jet machine for textile that he brought to Guimarães was working. So he was very passionate about this. He went to Brussels, he studied it, he came back in the 60s, he implemented in Hortas textile factory this machine, so it's still like he speaks like if it was in the time. So the piece also has the recordings of my father passionately explaining, here you can do it, even you can see it, he even made it with a chorizo, that it was what he could grab in that moment. So that his description on the interviews are very, very passionate, so you can really even see the machine. So I had this idea of machine, and then the birth, and the isolation, because also in a certain point Claudia was mentioning, okay, we had this isolation, so this is something that it's important also to bring it in some way, like everyone in residence also experienced it and also brought in. So so it started also with this idea, okay, we are in the womb belly for 280 days in isolation before we come back, or we come out to life. So this was the part important part, like to start, and also what was this birth, and what did it mean, and what is for me coming back to the place I was born, and how I fit the machine of my dad into all this process. So I thought, okay, let's try to build a womb, and this womb, coincidentally, because this aspect of the residence and the piece itself, it came with a lot of coincidences and overwhelming points. I just heritage a roll of weaved textile, linen textile from my grandmother. So around 18, we calculated with my grandmother, that is now 90 years old, and she said, it's your time to carry this roll. So a few months ago, she gave me this and told me, take care, and you are not supposed to cut it. Which I discovered afterwards that my mom cut it, I cut it, grandmother cut it, everybody cut it, a little bit of this roll over time, but it's kind of a secret. So I said, like, I cut it. Oh, you shouldn't have made it, but your grandmother made it. I made it myself also. So I had this partnership in crime of cutting this roll. So I cut this roll to build the shape. So it's very important in all this process to mention that we work together with an amazing, amazing team. Ron is still here sitting after this night. We still spend in the hospital fixing it and adjusting it. It's been like an amazing, amazing team. Bernardo is sleeping. He worked with a robot that is now living inside of the womb. And yeah, we worked also with Ivo, a Polish architect that also helped in the developing shape. So it was online also work, and also sound-wise, I was going also to fetch and catch my colleague Francisca Gonçalves that was working on the sound of sea. And with this, like, we also recorded the sound of the sea that is inside of the womb. We recorded on the with hydrophones. And then my mother and my father, that's actually divorced, but I managed to bring them together inside of this womb in a dialogue, which was also very meaningful for me. And also technically inside of the womb, there's a lot of sticks with connections that were 3D printing, and there's all this complex side that my colleagues also support. And also for me, the challenge, I have one shot to cut this tissue. If I don't do it in one shot, I cannot do it anymore. So there was a lot of tension on like how to cut and where to cut, and there was this only one possibility. So inside then Bernardo developed two robot arms that would give the impression that somebody's touching on the womb, so it's pressing like babies do. And then it has an inner structure that was built mainly by Ron Rosemalen, that has this all connections one by one, and it had to fit, and this was our big and the most complex part of the whole project, was how to bring this robot together with this very organic, old, more than 100 years tissue that is very organic, and it has its own structure with all these precise movements and this technology. This was the big challenge of this project that took us literally in the operation room 10 to 15 hours of work every day. We sometimes even sleep there, and we were having this impression we were in this chirurgy, and some elements of all this story I didn't know. But when my mother came to the open, she told me before entering, she said, like, you know, I didn't tell you this part, but they had to put me some metal things on my vagina to hold it. And I was really like very impressed, because I didn't know that, but I used, as you can see up, some metal parts that I thought like it's a little bit aggressive, but in this, also this, in a way, it's part of it, and it was part of the whole process of giving and delivering this. And I end up to cross a phrase from Shakespeare in the end, where we were still preparing after the opening and arranging and changing, and the piece itself, it's still alive. We spent a lot of time, of course, but also colleagues passing by, and it's still changing. Just last night I discovered it has a red light and it becomes a kind of heart, so I didn't know that part. And this morning was still sunrise with the piece inside of the hospital, and I hope it's still alive and it continues alive for the next months. And thank you so much, everyone, to help and to build also this possibility for a lot of people. It makes a lot of difference, and it's a big transformation for some people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paulina, to share with us your so personal project and amazing project. We also will have the chance to experience it this afternoon with the guided visit. So now it is. I will put the things on you. You have been here today. Welcome, Joaquim, the director of the Biennial. You have been these 2 days with us, and I will ask you if you want to make some comments or to ask some questions. Can I have some help?
My name is Beatrice Sterk, and I have a question to Magdalena. I was very impressed with her presentation, also by the others, but especially with her because I have seen it, but I didn't know that she had three presentations, and I found it so wonderful that they are so different, each of them. And then she said in the beginning, she was looking at the space future, present, and past, and still another one. Was that a spiritual one?
Thank you. So the whole project that I made for the residency that became from the three parts of the artwork is named Beyond. And I was thinking about the space that sometimes we are between the sacral and the profanum time, but not only in the religious aspect, but also by the everyday time life that we have sometimes the special moments, special memories, special, I don't know, identity of some kind of object, some kind of situation. And all three art pieces that I made was and are about this kind of special time and special place. So yes.
I could feel it.
Thank you.
Yes, I was wondering about the role of technology here. Fantastic, you were working with robots in the sense of the robotic arm, because that was very striking with the material. But really, it's a question about the future of the idea of residences, because those that were making the work afar in their place in Quebec and Montreal, for example, I wonder if that's also another kind of future that people, because it relies on a fantastic team, whether it's always necessary to be in place physically, or whether this idea of the remote to provide the process then releases ideas in a different way for then the transportation of work or not. It's a very interesting question when there's so much concern about regeneration of place and cultural tourism, that the paradox is the Biennale, seems to have found a fantastic way of using technology to be remote and near at the same time. So I wonder if that's the future in some way. Did that make sense to you?
I don't know. Thank you for your comment. Actually, I don't know to answer.
You don't have to answer.
We must reflect a lot, but actually, this is a new thing for us, and I think we create here something new through this methodology. When we in March, when we start working with the artists, and we know that it will be impossible to have all the artists here, we must recreate our methods of work and methods of thinking also. And it was really true that somehow we were the eyes, the heart, and the hands of the artists who can't come. Because actually it could be a nonsense to work in a site-specific artwork without being on site. But I think through this mediation, technology mediation, and also with lot of conversations, lot of sharing processes, not only from me, but also we asked all the community artists that were in residency to share their feelings, the more sensitive parts of the perception of the space with the artists which can come. Yes, I think we must think what happened here, and maybe we are making future.
There is another point, I think, which to add, is that the role of archives and collections can gain a greater significance because it gives a different kind of emphasis. You can't visit, but the research you did and with the people making the historic embroideries, there's a different kind of inclusivity in that process, which might otherwise not be so revealed. And for example, we can't go into the museum archive. It's not on a website, maybe it is, I'm sorry, I don't know, but it means it travels in a different way across time and space, which I think is another reflective point about bringing that into the open, which is very, very interesting.
Yes, a lot of new significances. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, more questions?
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment about this also, because I was also at the beginning of the residency working with the archive and the PDF documentation and a lot of files that you sent me, and you connected me with a lot of people from the museum collections that they are managed. But I think that when I come here and I went there to the museum and see the collection, there's something different that you can smell, can see the details, you cannot touch it, but you can see like be closer to these items. So I hope that the digital residency will be like the second stage of because I think that it's very important to be at the place, see, smell, like just absorb some kind of situation. So, yeah, thank you.
Sorry, it's only for continue this a little bit, that Magdalena now gives exactly the sense that you are fight for this Biennale and all, because it makes part of our ADN, that presential, okay, virtual you can see, only for say that after today we have, if you go in our website, contextile.pt, you can connect virtual visiting the different exhibitions. But it's the challenge to us, because a lot of artists, for respect in first, a lot of artists couldn't come, but you know, a lot, really a lot, compare, for example, to the last edition. And a lot won't comes, and also for the residency for work, really. And okay, we give this opportunity to visit the best possible in video, in photos, all exhibitions. But Magdalena, you give the sense of this, presential, to feel. You can see only, but if you smell, or you sometimes you can touch, but the energy is coming also of the thing. So our fight also in this textile talk, but it was more easy, really, to make in virtual way. But that combining presential and virtual. But sure, we are learning a lot in new methodology, so it's fantastic, it's a good experience, but sure that we return, or you don't leave the presential in creation, in visiting, in the talking, because it's the essence of our life and our Biennale.
Yes, I wasn't really suggesting it was either or, but more thinking about how many other people you may have now contacted, made contact with through the virtual dissemination, who, yes, may really want to come and have that experience, but maybe they can't afford to travel, or they've come from somewhere where the flights in the future are going to be so expensive it may not be possible. So it might be both. It might have to shift according to economic circumstances. But I'm not suggesting it's one or the other.
Yes, of course. I think we are doing an in-between here. Do you have any more questions?
So just to add something to this very interesting conversation and to the topic that we are discussing now, I was thinking about Milene's presentation, and that perhaps she would not have been able to think about her home, where she was staying, where she was perhaps confined, and insert that kind of topic into this work at the distance. So it's really interesting to think about that these are limiting times, and that we have these limitations, but we can perhaps achieve this in between. It's really, really interesting.
So maybe you can have a topic for the next context. Do you want to say something else? So, we have on our schedule, this is my timer. We have in our schedule a topic that is Textile Talk conclusions. It is very hard to do conclusions at this time because we spend here more or less 2 days talking, seeing, reflecting, absorbing all these shares and process and methodologies and artworks from a lot of artists. As you can see, I have a lot of notes in my table. I'm not able to do the best conclusion because it needs reflection. But maybe I can make a summary of what we talked in these past 2 days. We talked about time and places. We talked about past and future of textiles. We talked about inside, outside landscapes. We talked about materiality and substance in chaos and order, in body and embodied and mind subjects, in public and private landscapes and space, the biennial itself as a topic of research. We talked also about place identity through textiles. We perceived a bit more of contemporary art through textiles. We talked about material as a potence or a power and container space. We also reflect on power source of the handmade. We talked about rescue and resignified memories, and also about communities and collaboration. We talked about textile as a matrix, as a builder of structures and space. We talked about sacred profane duality. We resignify the story, or we try to talk about the resignificance of the history and construct new through the tradition and history. We talked about paths and textile as visible traces of the territory. We talked about personal memory and collaboration and tradition. We talked about genesis and the origin of existence. We talked about textile as a power. I will think a lot about this, and maybe I can talk a bit more after. But I want to close my intervention in this biennial and in these textile talks, saying that I feel very emotional. Through reflective practice about a place and textile art, or the resignification of a territory, considering and or removing to peers, it was possible to give way to new discourses, appropriating the memory, inhabiting the unhabited, common or individual, the inane become alive. Thank you so much for all the artists, and thank you so much to all the team of Contextile. It was really a pleasure. I'm enriched with this edition. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Claudia. This edition, it was really, you are really fantastic. All the team, because, you know, it was not easy. And of course, you all are here. The others that couldn't come in presential way, but we know that they are some in alive or in some moments. And, well, we thank you again. We learn a lot with you, and the others are not here. And so, welcome to Guimarães, welcome to next edition. The people who live Guimarães in the next hours or days. And I can't say anymore. You say all. It was fantastic. You are here, and see you next time. See you. Only that 3 o'clock.
Yes, we are going to take a break for lunch, and we'll be back at 3 p.m. For a guided visit to the exhibitions. The meeting point will be in Convento dos Capuchos. We will start to visit the residencies resulting artworks, and also Stephen Schofield exhibition. Then we will move to Palácio Vila Flor to see the international exhibition. Don't forget 3 p.m. in Convento dos Capuchos. There is a restriction of entrances because we can do the visit with 10 visitors at a time. So if there are more visitors, we will split it in 2 groups, and we'll make 2 visits, okay? Thank you so much for your presence.